dude. They'll come through the door. I will shoot.
Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your incredible attention to GunGuyTV. The fact that you help us all fight for our rights under the Second Amendment, the Constitution in general, because sometimes it's a Fourth Amendment thing, sometimes a First Amendment thing, but whatever the rights are, we're fighting for them. Our focus is on the Second Amendment firearms stuff. And we got some great news. And that was that the Rody case had a wonderful ending and a terrific decision from Judge Roger Benitez. We call him Saint Benitez here in San Diego and in California, who struck down as unconstitutional the law we all knew was unconstitutional to begin with, which is California's first of its kind ever in the nation and anywhere in the nation requirement to have all kinds of background checks and nonsense in order to simply go buy ammo. And so that victory, having hit the way it hit, it brought up in me, I'm just going to start this out this way. Now, forgive me, because it's going to be a little bit longer video, and I know that. If you watched my show before, you know that sometimes these drag on, but this one I think is an important one. And here's why, because I've been at this for a while, certainly not as long as Rick, and certainly not as long as Sam. Sam started this when I was a child. I mean, I don't think so, actually. We're pretty close in age, but he's been at this a really long time. And I can sometimes personally get frustrated in the sense that while I look at it from a high level and see that we're making legal headway, the resulting headway at the ground level where the average gun owner is sometimes gets stolen from us, and we have to go back and refight the same battles over and over again. And so we can rah and be excited about it, and we should be. And we can continue the fight, and we should. But I think sometimes we have to be real about it and recognize that it's not going to be quick, it's not going to be easy, and that oftentimes, while the lawyers and legal beagles and lobbyists are going to be able to say we won here, and here, we may not actually feel the result of that victory sometimes at the level of the average gun owner. And that's the part that is extraordinarily frustrating. So, gentlemen, I have Rick Travis from the California Rifle and Pistol Association, and Sam Paredes from Gun Owners of California, and Gun Owners of America for that matter. And since I started this weird project called GunGuyTV, I have encouraged you to support and join these organizations, and I still do, because if you want to fight for your rights in California, these gentlemen right here, they represent the organizations that are actually doing it. There's a lot of organizations, there's some others helping, but the truth is in California, these folks are the ones that are carrying the water for this. These are the ones that are doing the job. These are the ones you need to join and support. There you go. I've just said that. Now I've played my role here, and no, they don't pay me for any of that. However, I think once in a while I get a cup of coffee out of them, which is kind of cool. All right. So anyway, gents, that's the dilemma, I think, at this moment. So I think before we even start, if you can give us kind of an update of where are we with the Rody case, because I know that my understanding is that the state is trying to get the Ninth Circuit to put a stay on it. But at the moment, you can go buy ammo or buy ammo online or whatever without a background check. So update us. Where are we? And either one of you, doesn't matter. Rick.
Well, I was going to let Sam go.
Sam.
I'll go.
Doesn't matter to me.
So as everybody knows, the California Rifle and Pistol Association has played the lead role on Rody versus Becerra, which became Rody versus Bonta. As the Attorney General changed, they changed the names of the lawsuits. It's been, I believe, 7 years. It's been a long time since this lawsuit was filed, challenging California's ammunition registration regime. The fact that we have to not only ask permission, have a background check, and then pay a fee before we are allowed to exercise our right to buy ammunition. And we can go on and on and on for hours discussing whether ammunition is protected by the Second Amendment. Needless to say, I'm going to boil it down to this. Ammunition is protected by the Second Amendment. So this case came before Judge Roger T. Benitez, St. Benitez, and he ruled in our favor. This was before Bruin. So he ruled in our favor based on a very interesting and prescient decision that he came up with. Not only did he rule in our favor using the tiered scrutiny approach that has developed when all of the courts flipped the middle finger to the Supreme Court and did not want to follow Heller that said we have to use text, history, and tradition. And he argued on text, history, and tradition, proving, outlining, and deciding that this regime on ammunition was unconstitutional in California. So it went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It rumbled around there. It ultimately came back down to Judge Benitez after the Bruin decision, after Miller, after Duncan, and all of these things. And they sent them all back to him and said, do them over. And he gave us an amazing ruling in great detail, pointing out how this law was unconstitutional. He also did not issue a stay on his ruling. So it went into effect the minute he put pen to paper on his ruling. So in California, as of right now, you can buy all the ammunition you want without having to go through a background check or pay any fees. You can order it online. You can go to Nevada or any other state, buy ammunition, and bring it with you. It is all legal. It is back to the status quo that existed prior to this registration scheme. So this was a great victory. And folks, you have to look at this as a war that we are fighting. And we fight one battle after another battle after another battle. The fact is that each of our battles have advanced us to a more important future battle in another arena that is getting us closer to resolving these particular issues before the court. So it is greatly frustrating. Just remember, before Bruin, we had none of this hope. We all knew that the government was going to infringe on our Second Amendment rights ad nauseum, and they were going to be very successful at doing that. But after Heller and McDonnell and Caetano and then Bruin, they have no longer done that. And now, in the last year or so, you have seen a great flurry of lawsuits that have been filed here in California and across the fruited plain, where we are gaining victories in the arenas that we are fighting in. And yes,
so let's talk about that. Okay,
yes.
So let's talk about that. I asked Chuck Michelle about this when he was on the show, and if I remember correctly, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a legal beagle. I'm just, I'm just a gun owner and an instructor, so that Rick doesn't get after me about saying I'm just a gun owner or an average guy or something. He doesn't like it when I do that. I am an average guy, but there you are. Okay, look, here's the thing. One of the things Chuck explained is that because the Second Amendment was so clear for so long, and people understood what it meant for so long, there really had never been a need to drag it through court to prove what keep means and what bear means and what shall not be infringed means, or for that matter, what regulated meant at the time that the word was used, or what a militia is. None of that needed to be defined in court because everybody understood what it meant. And then suddenly we got into the mid 20th century, 1960s, and all of a sudden everything starts getting confused. And maybe a little bit before that. There was a time when if you wanted a Thompson, you could just go on a catalog and order it. It would show up at your door. Fully automatic, thank you very much. Or whatever gun you wanted. But obviously, things have changed over time. This is different than things like the First Amendment. The First Amendment has all this case law built up over decades to support what do all these things mean and what constitutes a violation of the First Amendment by the government and what doesn't. And so as a result, it's a lot harder for the government to infringe upon the First Amendment. They have to, conspire with Facebook and the old Twitter and like that to do it because they can't do it themselves very easily. And so what Chuck was explaining to me is because of that, what's had to happen now is we've spent decades building that history of case law, what he called Second Amendment jurisprudence, I think was the word he used, because it needed to be established so that the courts would go back and say, no, That's already been decided, and this is what this means. Nope, keep is already decided, and that's what it means. Bear is what this means. That's what the court says. And this was never done before. And it takes a long time to do. And now we have Jackson, which I think is the case that that Judge Benitez referred to, that clarified, as Sam said, that ammunition is protected by the Second Amendment. We have Gaetano, Gaetano would be Tony in Italian, so I don't know if it's Gaetano or Gaetano, but one way or the other, I think it's Gaetano, which clarified that the Second Amendment doesn't just apply to guns, because it was a stun gun case. We have the Heller case, which established what keep meant. We have the McDonald case, which took the Second Amendment and for the first time in the history of our country, applied it to the whole country, not just the federal government. That had never been done because everybody knew what the heck it meant, but it needed to be done. And so now that's been done. That's what one of the things Heller did. It defined the right as an individual right rather than a right of militias. And then McDonald came along and said, okay, that right, by the way, is protected. And this amendment applies to the state and local governments as well, not just the federal government. And then Bruin comes along and it defines bear. What does bear mean? Along with a few other things. It also went and established a test that needed to be established because the courts in their wonky weirdness were doing all this gymnastics, bending over backwards to try to force a situation where the government always won. So the Supreme Court now established a new test. Now that I've gone through that, I think I'm right. You can just nod your heads, guys, if I've got this correct. Okay. And what Chuck said now is that now what's going to happen is, as a knee-jerk reaction, all these anti-gun legislators and anti-gun local towns and cities and like that are going to pull every trick in the book to try to figure out a way around what the courts have just done. And that's not new. That's what they did with the First Amendment. That's what they've done with other amendments. And what's had to happen over the time is those things have to get dragged through court so that the court can further drill down and define these sort of fringe issues. Fringe is a terrible word. People go, it's not a fringe issue that you got to get a background check. That's not what I mean. I'm not saying it's not an important issue. I'm saying that it wasn't one of the core issues that's already been decided. Now the courts have to go through and decide these other ones. And what'll happen over time is the ability of governments to infringe on our constitutional rights protected under the Second Amendment is going to get narrower and narrower and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because the case law had never been built. That's what's happening. In case you don't understand what happened. I didn't. I asked Chuck, and that's what he explained to me. So that's where we are right now, I think. And I apologize for talking so long, but I think it's important, if you don't mind listening to me drone on here for a minute or two. I think it's important to understand the status of where we are and how we got here and why we are going through what we're going through with the Second Amendment. And guys, let me know, did I get that right? Is there more I should have added? Anything else I should have clarified?
Yeah, I'd probably add a little bit more to it. I think you did an excellent job, Joel, of explaining where we're at. I think there's another component, Chuck and I talked about this quite a bit, and that is on the case law, the Second Amendment jurisprudence that was excellently done. I think the frustration that all of us feel is, if you're any of us on this call, this has been a lifelong thing that we've all fought at different levels, different times. Sam's been arguably the person most involved within the legislature doing this for the longest period. But, and I appreciate that, Sam, all the jokes aside that I give you on the sideline. But one of the things I think we also have to look at is this idea that this generation, when I say this generation, I don't mean millennials versus boomers. I just mean people living today in general tend to think of like, well, we shouldn't have to do this. And it's like, I've talked to you guys before, I think we have to go back and look at our history. And one of the things Judge Benitez did that I thought was outstanding in this decision was he took us back to look at the history, not just of jurisprudence, but the history of the Second Amendment and government's desire to go after it. And one of the things is that, at one point we were all British, and a lot of people are like, then we became Americans. And I always look at them and go, and what made us become Americans? And you get all the textbook answers you would expect out of the average person. And there was a time in my life I did too, where I go, oh, taxation without representation. Why? Because that's what your second grade teacher drills in your head. And then when you get to like fourth or fifth grade, you hear, oh, it was so we could have states' rights versus today's rights. Of course, Civil War had a little issue with that, and you kind of get that history in your head. But the reality was, it wasn't taxes. It wasn't putting soldiers in our home. It wasn't even, and there's debate on if you want to call it a massacre or not, but the government shooting its own citizens in Boston. You have all these instances. We don't take up firearms. We don't really rebel. We had some protests, but pretty tame compared to today. But when they came for our firearms on April 19, 1775, that was the bridge too far. And I think this is so important, a very unorganized, rather intoxicated group of people said no, and they stood up to the world superpower of the day and said, not just no, but heck no, but double hockey sticks on it, and went after them. And our government went, oh, those aren't British citizens anymore. And that was the day we became known as Americans for the first time. And from that time period, as cited so beautifully by Benitez, government at state levels like Kentucky, at the federal level, have numerously and egregiously, one of the quotes that he puts in here, our Attorney General Bonta went after 148, I believe it was, examples of, well, this is where government can do this. And very quickly, he says every single one of these, including the final 50 identified by the Attorney General, constitute a long, embarrassing, disgusting, insidious, reprehensible list of examples of government tyranny towards our own people. The Attorney General of a state that prides itself in inclusivity and making sure it checks off all the boxes to be loving to everybody is the very one that said, hey, to go after gun owners, you know what? Let's use this when we told Black people they couldn't have guns. Let's just use this law when we said that Native Americans can't gun. Maybe let's go after the religious thing. Catholics. There was a point where some of our government said Catholics couldn't have guns. Those were the reasons that they used to justify what they've done in these laws. And I think that's part of what we need to realize, as tired as we are, as fatigued as we get, in countries and in places where people said, okay, I'm just done. I'm hanging it up. They have no rights to firearms. We still have it 250 years later because every generation, as Judge Benitez cited, has had to fight back. Sam and I, what we do for the people we represent inside the Capitol and others like us across this great nation, are walking in the footsteps of people that did it before us. And we are not idiots. We realize that when we hang it up to go retire, and Sam and I have that long talked about sunset with a cigar and a glass of something and go, oh, we're done. And you get to come to, Joel.
Okay, cool.
There's going to be someone that's filling your space of what you're doing. There's going to be someone filling all of our spaces because it will be their turn at bat. And so realize, if you're watching us, listening to us, we all share these same frustrations. We've all talked each other off the cliff. We've all been supportive because it's mind-boggling how much junk, but we are winning. And that's the thing you got to realize. It may look dark, but they're fighting so hard against us because they're so frustrated that they're losing so badly that they're
Rick, I just want to point out something that I want to hammer this home, because this is why I'm grateful for the likes of Reno May, the armed scholar. I've never met either one of these guys. And I have to confess, I don't watch their channel, but it's not because I don't watch their channel. I don't watch YouTube very much. I'm 65 years old and I got other things to do. But I'm grateful for those young men and young women who have decided to pursue being the megaphone that gets the information out, because there's going to come a time I don't want to do it anymore or just can't. And not just me, obviously I'm not all that in a bag of chips, but I mean, there's a lot of us older guys out there doing that to some degree, even if we're just talking about Hickok 45, who's out there just making, videos because and in the process of doing so, he normalizes the gun culture, but he's not exactly a spring chicken either. And at some point or other, he's going to stop. So it's important that these young people, I call them young people because they're young. I mean, I'm old enough to be their father, as you guys are, that they're up doing this kind of stuff too. And I'm grateful for them. But what I hear you saying is that from the day that the country started at Lexington and Concord until now, Americans have been fighting some version of this same battle.
Mhm.
And am I correct in hearing you say that we will always, Americans, as long as the country exists and as long as we are willing to fight for it, we will always be fighting a government that wants to disarm us?
Yeah,
Does
government
that
doesn't
sound like
want
an
its,
accurate statement to you?
yeah, government doesn't want its people to be able to have the right to say no. Governments always want to get to the position of where they create serfs, not citizens. And a citizenry has to be able to stand up. And one of the ways you're able to do that is with firearms. And it's not that we ever advocate for that. It's the last thing we ever want to have happen. But your ability to protect your family, put food on the table, be self-reliant, that scares people in power because it means you don't need them.
We are walking in the footsteps of giants, folks. If you go back and you read the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers, and you listen and read about the debates that our founding fathers had, ultimately they decided, you know what? We understand that government does one thing. It goes from one that has experienced the blood of battle and the sacrifice to obtain freedom, knowing that that is the zenith. From then on, government has all governments try to gain more power and more influence and to grow bigger. It's just a natural thing. And that's why they gave us the Constitution and in particular the Bill of Rights to be able to fight our government against that. And I do mean that. We are fighting our government. We are fighting the governor and the attorney general of the state of California and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and the Congress and the president. We are fighting for freedom just as they did all the way back then. And every time I think about that, it gives me the tingles because the achievement of victory towards freedom is the same kind of effort and tenacity and just the willingness to fight for that goal of freedom. And that's what we're doing. And here in California with this ammunition craziness, we are one step forward. Our founding fathers gave us this system of government. It was not perfect. It had all kinds of pimples and wrinkles, but it's the best that's ever existed on the planet in history. And they created this system where differences of thought in the arena of politics was what they wanted to have make free. And they did give us this backdrop, this final wall of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in order to make sure that conversation doesn't go above and beyond that. Well, that's what the government and that's what the anti-gunners are trying to do, is they're trying to climb the wall of the Constitution and the Second Amendment and the entire Bill of Rights. And that's what we are fighting against. So right now we're in a situation where we got this great victory. Thank you, Chuck Michelle and Associates. Thank you, CRPA, and everybody who played a role in getting us this victory. Now,
well, thank you, GOC. I want to make sure people realize GOC has been a vital partner in that.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Rick, and I appreciate that. And the partnership is one of the things that is allowing us to achieve the victories. We have a legal dream team. I tell people this: the fact that Gun Owners of California, California Rifle and Pistol Association, Second Amendment Law Center, Gun Owners of America, Gun Owners Foundation, and the Second Amendment Foundation are all putting our legal brain trusts together to achieve these victories, and we are winning. And yes, Joel, along the way, we're going to have some temporary losses. You know, you look at the Battle of Gettysburg and you see how ultimately the Union won, but there were some times and points where they took some losses that could have turned history on its end, but it didn't, because they were willing to stay committed and to fight until to give everything they could, including their lives, and they were successful. And that's the situation we are in right now. So the Attorney General and the Governor, I'm walking around the streets trying to avoid the melted hair gel that's spread all over the state of California from the distress that this has cost the governor. And you know, I liken it to Don Quixote and Sancho Panza with the governor and the attorney general swinging at the windmills of anti-gun nirvana. And in fact, they know that they're going to lose, or else they wouldn't be so vitriolic. So now this case is before the ninth. The attorney general, in his death throes on this issue, because he got schlemieled on this case. Rick, you pointed out the fact that they used radical racist laws of the past to justify their ability to control ammunition is reprehensible, and they should own it. As a matter of fact, if it was me, I'd close up shop and leave if I were the Attorney General and the Department of Justice after using that as their foundation for opposing these laws.
Well, and not just once. I mean, Judge Benitez called them out and really called them out and scolded them, because this is the third time in 3 different cases that they've trudged out these same horrible examples in an effort to support their argument. And it's not just a one-off. I mean, they keep doing it over and over again. So I just wanted to point that out. It is reprehensible is a great word for it.
Well, I think you're going to hear a couple of lobbyists over this session cite Judge Benitez's reprehensible use of these cases when opposing current legislations, because I think the legislature might want to own this and have a discussion with their attorney general, because I want to personally hang this around their necks in front of the media.
Yeah, I see
I agree.
Lobbyists who will be using their own words, reminding them of what it is that they have said and done, and let's see how they react when they realize that their foundation is based on radical racist, precepts. So now I'll finish the process on where we are right now. So the Attorney General asked for the emergency motions panel in the Ninth Circuit. So by random selection, every month there are 3 judges that sit on this emergency motions panel, and they entertain any emergency requests that come from any of the states within the circuit. And what they will do is they will consider the motions and make a ruling whether, depending on what, in this case, the state is asking for the emergency motions panel to issue a stay on Judge Benitez's permanent injunction. So the Attorney General was not able to get his motion in time for the January panel to consider this, that we know was a very anti-gun panel. We don't know who the 3 judges are on the emergency motions panel are for the month of February out of the 9th, but we have a with the Lord shining down his smile upon us and the clouds parting and doves coming down and peace and love, we may get 2 judges on that panel that'll say, Judge Benitez is right. We have a better chance of winning this case, and therefore they are not going to stay the permanent injunction, which means that freedom continues to go. From that emergency motions panel, the case gets assigned to a merits panel, 3 judges who will hear the merits. And that is the situation we are in right now. If the emergency motions panel does not issue a stay, then we continue to have the ammunition laws overturned, made null and void in the state of California. People will be able to buy ammunition without background checks, bring them from out of state, do all of these things. And we will continue to do that until the Ninth Circuit rules against us, in which case we are prepared to go to the next battlefield, whether it's an en banc or go straight to the United States Supreme Court on this issue. So that is the physical situation we are in. For all of you folks who are asking questions, dealers and ammunition buyers, you are free to buy ammunition, to make ammunition, to bring it in from out of state, import it, use it any way you want without the government nanny doing a background check on you. And Judge Benitez did an amazing job to show how inefficient and horribly unfair the ammunition system is in the state of California. They said, yeah, we've caught we've caught a couple hundred of people who were not supposed to buy ammo, who tried to buy ammunition out of hundreds of thousands of background checks that they committed. The percentage of worthiness of this program is measured in 0.000 some number beyond that. So it is a system that has regularly prevented law-abiding citizens who are eligible to buy ammunition from buying it because the government, their database systems and their record-keeping systems are all jacked up, and they cannot figure out if a person is lawful or not. So grossly unfair. Judge Benitez said it is. It is therefore unconstitutional because it violates purely and simply the Second Amendment as defined in Bruin and Heller and McDonald, Caetano, and all of that. So that is the situation that we are in right now.
Okay, so I'm going to give you, if you're watching this, I'm going to give you the, first of all, if you're watching this and you've hung on this long, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to give you the unvarnished truth. Here it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to butter you up like a Sunday biscuit. Here it is, right here. Every time we get a victory like this in the state of California, the state is going to try to get a stay on it. And probably the majority of the time, they're going to get one. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they will. And then it's going to go to the 3-judge panel, and then it might go to an en banc panel, and then it might end up in the Supreme Court. And so there's going to be a number of victories that we get at the lower court level that we have to continue to fight for as it goes through the appellate system. And it may be that we get a victory like this one, and then it has no practical effect beyond a few days or a week on the average gun owner because it gets stayed by the Ninth Circuit and we have to go back and fight it again. First of all, to say that sucks is the understatement of the century, and all three of us on this call get it because we all live in California and we got to live under it just like you. Okay? The point I want to make, though, is that while that is likely to occur, we have a couple of choices. We can say we're never going to win, and we can just throw in the towel and give up. And I firmly believe that's a terrible choice. The other choice is we can admit to ourselves that this is never going to be easy, that our ancestors had to fight these stupid battles all across the country from the day the country was first formed, from the first shot that was heard round the world, as they say in school when you're a kid, until now. And we're going to be fighting these battles long after your great-great-grandchildren have died, as long as the country's still around, because freedom is not popular among tyrants. And freedom is not popular among people who want to exhibit control over you. Certainly not the freedom to speak your mind. Why do you think they're going after Elon Musk like crazy at every turn? Because he bought Twitter and turned it into X, and he's not censoring people much. At the same time, the freedom is not popular among any of these people who want to control. You cannot control an armed populace. That was a post on X, speaking of X, earlier today from the guy, I don't know his name, the guy that has Iraq veteran 8888. And I thought it was a great post. I should have copied it or whatever, requoted it or something. I didn't think about it. But he said, you can't get rid of the militia because every able-bodied armed person is a member of the militia. That is so true. Whether they're training together or not, that doesn't mean they can't, right? The key is that if they are armed, if Americans are armed, they cannot easily be oppressed. And so tyrants don't like freedom of speech, they don't like freedom of movement, and they don't like armed populace. They can't. It's very hard to oppress people who have those rights. That's why those rights are very, very important. And that's why we must continue fighting them. And because we will always have tyrannical people in our government. We will always have leaders who want to control. We will always have leaders who are greedy and criminal and corrupt. That's never going to stop. The day that stops is the day that Jesus comes back and the whole thing comes to an end. Until then, it's not going to stop, which means we're going to be fighting this battle long after the three guys on this call and you watching this call are below the grass and not breathing anymore. We are wiser if we make the choice to just simply admit that to ourselves and say, okay, we got a great victory from Judge Benitez. Now it's going to get stayed probably, so let's enjoy getting the ammo while we can, and let's get ourselves ready to go and get ready to get back in the fight because the fight hasn't stopped yet. If we admit that to ourselves, I think, and if we're brave enough and bold enough to be honest with each other and just lay out the unvarnished reality of it and trust each other to make the right decision, that most of us will, and we'll keep fighting. So I'm going to make the commitment to you right here, right now, if you're watching this channel. I am always, unless I completely screw up, and then you can remind me because I'm a human being, and having never made a mistake before, I don't know how I could do it now. I'm going to try very hard to give you the honest, unvarnished truth every time. And I'm going to remind you that, yeah, we can jump up and down and we should celebrate the victory, but we're going to get knocked down a peg here pretty soon by the appellate court. We got to go back and fight. It's not ever going to be a final victory. It never was. It never will be. It never will be. But we certainly are winning, and we certainly will take away their ability to fight a lot over time as we go through this establishment of jurisprudence. I'm reminded, I think it was a Ben Franklin who was asked when the forming of the country, correct me if I'm wrong, what kind of government we had. And he said, a republic if you can keep it. Mm-hmm. Which was, I think, a dire warning. We've given you a great government. If you go to sleep and you don't fight for it, you won't keep it. Anyway, gentlemen, that's my opinion. Tell me if I'm wrong or whatever. It's all on you. I think we've probably beat it to death, but I want to make sure that we leave people with the understanding that we need help. Obviously, gun owners of California need your help. Your time, your money, your attention. You're sharing this video so that other people understand this is a long fight, mm-hmm. and that they're not just, being given shiny objects to look at. CRPA needs your help. This is a long fight, and it's a costly one. And I'm just going to end this telling you something these gentlemen won't tell you, and then I'll let them speak. Rick, Sam, Chuck Michelle and his attorneys, any of these guys, could be making an awful lot more money if they were in a different industry. These two guys on this screen are professional lobbyists. Do you know what lobbyists make when they work for the pharmaceutical industry? Or let's see, the oil industry or whatever? These guys could be living in palatial mansions at this point. Chuck Michel's practice was actually something else before he decided to do this. Mm-hmm. And his practice has taken a major pay cut as a result of doing this. So these are not guys who are living in Taj Mahals. They could be, but they've opted not to. So I want you to understand, neither one of these guys, even Chuck, not walking around with $20,000 suits. I know we picked on Wayne LaPierre over that, and rightly so. Okay, but that is not the case here. So if anybody tells you that, it's a bald-faced lie. I know these men personally, and I can tell you it isn't so. So anyway, there you are. I've said my piece. There you go. It's all up to you guys. Whatever you want to add, go ahead.
I'll finish up first and let Sam close it out. I think if you go back to Jefferson said, we have to water the tree of liberty every generation. That wasn't just one. That was every. So I think it's the same kind of attitude that was asserted by Franklin. And you can go and see that from all the founding fathers. They were very clear that you're going to have to. And then again, I think as you move through history, you can hear Lincoln say it, you can hear Teddy Roosevelt say it, you can hear, George W. Bush say it. I mean, people that have been in those positions understand that what we have in this country is at best a gift for a few moments. And unless you do your part to keep it going, you're going to lose it. When it comes to the Second Amendment, I think it is important for people to realize that, unfortunately, every group has some people that can be actors or do something wrong. But I have no problem saying it. I don't live in a big house, by a long shot. Probably most people watching this have a much bigger house than I do, and I don't care. That's not why I do this. Sam and I, if it was about that, we would have left a long time ago. It's because I personally started in this to make sure that my kids had this type of government. Now I'm doing it to help my kids, help my grandchildren have this kind of government. And if the good Lord lets me stay here long enough, maybe I'll still be somewhere talking about this so that my great grandchildren can have it. Mm-hmm. But my intent is that my children and grandchildren and their peers will pick up the mantle and keep moving forward. And that's what this is about. I understand everybody when you get frustrated. Believe me, like I said earlier, we all get frustrated. We all talk to each other when we're frustrated. So we're not looking at you saying we don't. Just be thankful that you don't hear all the negative stuff that we get to hear 360 degrees around us all the time. So, and we're appreciative to all the people that are very kind, because there's a lot of those people that are salt of the earth, and that's where we draw a lot of the energy to keep doing this. But this is a victory. It is moving us forward. It is a moment to feel good, because we're proving that our government is corrupt. We're proving that our government knows no bounds to being corrupt, and that should be enough to motivate all of us to get up every morning and push back.
Guys, I'm reading a book right now on Patrick Henry, and everybody remembers him from grade school. Give me liberty or give me death. His love for country, his patriotism for freedom and for his fellow Americans. And we are walking in their footsteps. We are walking in the footsteps of Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Madison. You just go on, Adams. We are walking in their footsteps, and you are walking along there with us. So I'd like to point out a couple of things. Number one, I'm walking in the footsteps of Senator H.L. Richardson, who founded Gun Owners of California and Gun Owners of America. He passed the baton down, and that's what I have been doing, because I wanted to continue the heritage of fighting for the Second Amendment and the rights of all Americans and all Californians. So I'm in a humble way very proud of being involved in that. The left wouldn't be pulling all of this shenanigans, all of the anti-gunners, unless they knew we had them on the rocks. So now is the time to crush them into oblivion. And Joel, you're right. They're like cockroaches. We stomp on some of them, and amazingly they come out from someplace else and continue to fight. Well, we are really good cockroach stompers, and we will keep crushing them and moving liberty forward and fighting for our God-given rights.
I shouldn't say it, but comparing these people to cockroaches is an insult to cockroaches. But that's just my humble opinion. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It was a great victory. Benitez wrote a tremendous decision, and it's probably going to get stayed. So we'll get ammo now. And if it does, that's fine. We're going to get in the fight. So here's my encouragement to you. We're with you. You're not alone. We're with you. We're not going to stop. And neither's anybody else. At least I hope not, anyhow. And you shouldn't either. So even though it's frustrating, and sometimes if it is frustrating, that's fine. Reach out to me. I'll see if I can encourage you a little bit. But understand that the plain truth of it is, the battle is not ever going to be completely won. The day that we sit back and relax is the day that these tyrants are going to come try to take our rights again. So we got to stay on it. And we can't blink, and we can't rest. We take a rest once in a while, but we need to get after it all the time. Okay. So anyway, there you go. Have a wonderful week. Thank you, gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. And wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.